Our disability is our greatest strength. It gives us the supervision to see the issues facing humanity from a more inclusive perspective and the grit to fight back against all odds. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the More Than Walking Video podcast discussion. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the podcast where people of all abilities gather to discuss pressing issues that affect the disability community and the implications for the world at large. We are your host. I am Corey Pheez, complete C4 quadriplegic since 2005.
And I'm Jonathan Sigworth, C7 complete quadriplegic since 2006, both of us hailing from the great state of Connecticut.
We are recording this on Thursday, the 19th of June, 2025. And in a little bit, we'll be discussing accessible and affordable housing. Meet the neighbors.
And just as a reminder, Super Adaptables is made possible in part by a grant from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center. The information provided and opinions expressed in these podcasts do not necessarily reflect the views of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. For more information about the Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center, visit www.christopherreeve.org. Also, I should note that the views expressed on this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of More Than Walking either, but belong to us as individual speakers.
So, in 2024, approximately 65.6% of American households own their homes. And like any other person, wheelchair users and others with disabilities desire to do the same, have a decent place to call their own. It gives the occupants independence, affording them shelter from the elements, privacy, and peace of mind. However, with a median home cost of $226,000, it's one hurdle to purchase the property. For many with mobility issues, it will also consist of needing some modifications to fit the person's unique needs.
Unfortunately, attaining that level of autonomy is often prohibited by a number of factors, such as inequalities caused by bureaucracy, high interest rates, and lack of accessible design. This has led to countless people remaining in either nursing homes, institutionalized, or homeless. According to one website, the cost of renovating a home to make it handicap accessible can range from $15,000 to $15,000 and much more. Chasing this portion of the American dream seems elusive and expensive. So what's in your wallet, Corey?
Gosh, I wish it was winning lotto tickets. That's definitely what I wish was in my pocket at this point. But man, yeah, with that being said, we want to welcome all of our other Super Adaptables with us today. And as we call on you, say hello, your name, where you're calling in from, your disability, and briefly, what would be the worst housewarming gift someone could give? Now, Harley, you can start us off.
I'm Harley Draven. I'm calling from this great state of Texas. I'm a C7 incomplete quadriplegic since my 19th birthday in 1994. And for a housewarming gift, a bad one, towels. I don't know. To me, towels are personal. I mean, that you got it your own color scheme and stuff. So, but yeah, just great to be here. And this is a really important topic.
Take it. You don't want like little ducklings going across crocheted flowers.
Okay, I can tolerate the ducks, but forget the flowers.
And also, I mean, even if you know the person, you don't know where that towel's been. They could have just thrown it in the backseat of their car. Who knows who's been sitting in the backseat of their car, like their dog. There's a number of things.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm on board with you with that, Harley.
Mark.
My name's Mark, C7 quad complete since 1985. I live in South Carolina. I'd be okay with towels. I have such a motley assortment of towels. I've got way more towels than necessary since I live alone. But one of my former bosses even gave me towels. I can't remember if it was for Christmas or for our birthday. But I remember thinking, that's an interesting gift. But they're really good towels. They're very absorbent. And I'm big on absorbency when it comes to towels. The worst gift? I don't know. What's a bad gift if you're at least they're a good guest? A cheap ass bottle of wine, that would be a bad gift. Or fruitcake. I don't know. Nobody likes fruitcake.
Corey, how about you?
Oh man. Gosh. Don't show up with a bowl. Like I don't want any bowl. Like I don't want a bowl like where it's like guests come over and like you have like a bunch of M&Ms or candy or something like that. Like I remember, I'm not gonna lie, like when I got married, we had so many bowls, tons and tons of bowls from like Home Goods, decorative bowls, bowls.
Like those big decorative bowls, yeah.
Yeah, it was just too much.
You
Like
put colorful marbles in. You have to
right,
find.
like I didn't know what to do
You
with
can't
the
eat out of it.
yeah, you can't eat out of it. You don't want to trash it because it's too nice looking. So yeah, some of those things I had to like kind of donate. It's just overwhelming. It was just like,
Yeah.
look, it's another bowl. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's like the worst, especially if a person like gets married or something. Um, and let's like, because those were wedding gifts for us. So we already had a house, for a while. So we had all the bowls we could use at that point.
Hmm.
John, how about you?
Um, I've never received this. I think I've given this once, not necessarily as a housewarming gift, but I'm assuming that this would be one of the worst. One of the singing trouts.
Oh,
Um,
like the bass,
some,
the red button
yeah,
underneath.
yeah. That's just the most annoying gift I can think of, and I've definitely given it to someone. Um, but I guess in general, something that's supposed to be going on a wall, that is not personal and makes lots of noise. Yeah, the singing trout. Um, yeah, that's what I would choose.
Like taxidermy, like a raccoon on a plaque just hanging on the wall.
Unless
Man.
it's like really original, like it's a, I don't know. We'll see.
I got a turkey on the wall behind me there in the hallway. You can see.
But see,
Real,
as a
real,
hunt,
real taxidermy is that's talent, both both in the finding the dead animal, making the dead animal, or preserving the dead animal. So
yeah.
I'm all
But
for
see,
it.
as a hunter, as
So
someone that hunts, I would think like that's appropriate,
Right.
like
yeah,
in terms of Mark, because of Mark hunts.
we're recycling roadkill, and anyway, we should get back on topic here. So, Corey, you want to go for the first one?
Yeah, for sure. Um, so yeah, so we're talking about accessible and affordable housing, and me and John have been having a lot of good conversation revolve around this subject, and not only just what we're facing in today's day and age, but just the history of homelessness in this country. Like, when did it kind of start? Who were the first people to really be grouped as being homeless? What does homeless even mean? We've come across a lot of great information regarding it, but for those of us in the disability community, we know that that search is a lot harder than just not being able to find the rental property that of your choosing, or the condo, or if it's a residential single family a home, whatever place you want to call shelter. We know that we're faced with more challenges than not. So our first question is, how has the pursuit of accessible and affordable housing been for you? What is acceptable accessibility in a living situation? In your case, how do accessible or universal designs that you have experienced in long-term or short-term living settings measure up to your needs? And John, tell us about your experiences.
Yeah, so and Corey and I touched on this in our first episode this month. I realized I went from the hospital to my parents' living room to the college dormitory. And I was really lucky in the sense that the real like first accessible housing opportunity for me outside my parents' house, which was not that accessible. I mean, they had to widen a bathroom door and put a non-ADA ramp in front of the house to just get me in and out for doctor's appointments and things. But at the university, I had free reign, and that was already part of my plan. So for the first 8 years after my injury, really, I was fortunate to be in the university system and have access to that accessibility. It was only after I graduated and I moved back to the States from being in India for a year that I had to live on my own. And that was when, things got real and I realized I had to be in public housing. So I had to get on Medicaid and I had to get on the wait list and experience all of that. and it was at that point that I got married. And so I lived with my wife in public housing for a period of time, and then we found our own apartment, and then we got our first home. Um, Not because of funds that I have been able to save, but because of inheritance from my grandparents, So I was really fortunate, um, to be able to go through that process. Um, and this, knowing that a lot of this has to do with, family wealth being able to pass down from generation to generation, and not everyone has access to that, because of redlining, because of, uh, you know, racial segregation and other things in our past that does not make that accessible to everyone. Um, so that was a little bit about me. And for what does accessible mean for me? It basically means like, I have a manual chair, so I just have to fit through doorways and get up and into buildings and have bathrooms where you can roll into a shower and transfer onto a bench. So pretty minimal requirements in terms of accessibility in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, my journey was one of great concern because I thought that my parents would have to put me in like a nursing home. So that was one of the first questions I asked my parents, and my mom, it broke her heart because she thought that like why would I put my own child like in a nursing home? Like I'm going to do everything it takes to make a way, but that's where my mind just thought about, through experiences with like relatives and just in society in general, it's almost like embedded in your mind that most people don't have accessible homes. I'm thinking about my neighborhood that I grew up in, and most of the homes like you would never be able to access. I think I could think of like maybe two homes in my neighborhood that had like a wheelchair ramp that was built after somebody became disabled. So that was scary for me. But the pursuit of finding an accessible and affordable home was a lot different because being a veteran, you receive benefits and stuff. And so because I lived at home with my family, I had the opportunity to just save up. I paid a portion of the bills in the house, but it was a fraction of the amount of money I was able to save. So when I was ready to look for a house, I had, you know, cash on hand. I had developed a good credit score. These are some of the things I and John were talking to some of our experts about regarding this, is that some people can't even get their wheels in the door because they don't have a good credit score. So I focus a lot on building my credit beforehand, in addition to watching HGTV, figuring out those things that I needed to get in order. But that question about what is acceptable accessibility in a living situation. Um, as a high quad without arm function, I don't necessarily have to worry about lower countertops. And my first home had lower countertops that you could pull up underneath, like for the sink and what have you, if you wanted to prepare something. So I thought that those are cool features, but they didn't really benefit me. In fact, like it was actually harder on my wife because she had to like lean over more because it was lower and it was harder on her back and stuff. So it's like you're in a catch-22 because you don't know um, if all of the benefits going to just outweigh what others may have trouble with. But that was my experience. And as far as like accessible or universal design, um, in my experience, like in a long term or short term l- living situation, I find that in my house it's great because it's actually my house. But when I think about if I had to live short term, like in a hotel, God forbid, like something happened to my house, or there was like an emergency evacuation, it would be very difficult because you think about like high quads, you need to transfer using a Hoyer lift, and beds aren't necessarily always built in hotels without the boxes underneath. And so, how am I going to get in and out? I might be confined to sleeping in my chair, which is a scary prospect. I think about like from that standpoint. But Mark,
You
sorry.
wait, you like the boxes under? You need the boxes under the
No, I
beds and
don't.
the.
I hate that. I hate it. I don't even understand the point.
They're all too tall. They're all too tall. I just want to make sure you're not the cause for them all being
Oh my
super tall,
gosh,
Corey.
no.
Because if
Every
you're the
time,
cause, man, we're gonna have to
man, when I think
have a
about,
rumble or something.
yeah, man, you pull a Hoyer lift up to that, and it just stops. The caster wheels are just butting against the box underneath it is out of control, out of control.
Okay.
Um, but
Well,
hard.
Mark, go ahead.
Mark, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, no, Mark, it's fine.
So yeah, when I first got home from rehab, well, I got to come home on weekends a lot of times. And the home I grew up in with my mom and sisters and little brother and stepdad, it had a ground floor entrance come through the garage, and my room was downstairs anyhow. So that worked out pretty good. So I was able to get to my room, but I never got to go upstairs and have dinner with the family or anything like that. You know, I just kind of eat by myself, or sometimes they come downstairs and eat with me. But there was a bathroom down there too, but the door was barely wide enough to get in, but you couldn't really get to the shower and barely get to the toilet. And that was kind of an ordeal, and getting picked up and put in the shower all the time. That was a hassle. But you know, I did that for, I don't know, 7 months, and then went away to college. And again, you know, the dorm was pretty accessible. That was a good thing. And so I lived in the dorms for 2 years, kind of got spoiled there. And then I decided I wanted to move into an apartment. And that was my first time really trying to adapt something, and found a ground floor apartment. And the landlord was very open-minded, and allowed us to make some changes to a closet. Basically, we put in a shower in the closet, turned the closet into a shower. And you know, like not really a roll-in shower, but sort of a roll-in shower. We had to pay for it, but you know, he was willing to let us do it. And so that worked out pretty cool. I was there for 2 years. But then when I moved to South Carolina to go to grad school, it was a whole nother ordeal. Found an apartment, but it was in a high rise. And so I was way upstairs, and also found another flexible landlord, and was able to knock a wall out and make access to the bathroom that way. But it was a tub. They wouldn't do any changes there. So it was a tub transfer situation for a long time, which really limited my independence. So super blessed that after I got married, that my grandma had left me some money, and I was able to buy a little piece of land, and using the land as collateral for a bank loan to build a house. And that was 1995, 96. So universal design had just become a thing. And my wife was a writer on the side. And so she got in touch with some fancy cabinet place, and they had just come out with their universal design kitchen cabinets. So they wanted to test them out, and basically gave us a really good deal on them. So I've got really awesome kitchen and accessibility to my kitchen with the lowered countertops and pull unders and all that good stuff. But I built the house for me. So everything's ground level entrance, wide doorways, an amazing roll-in shower, and you know, roll under sink in the bathroom and all that. And now that I live alone, as I have for the last 10 years, it's super important. Because when your body has a really bad day, it's amazing to be able to largely take care of that myself, since I've got a roll-in shower and accessible washer and dryer and all that good stuff to take care of the nastiness. And that's huge. And when I got divorced, you know, my wife tried to throw me out of the house. And fortunately, my lawyer was able to convince the judge that, no, wait a minute now, you know, I get she's pissed, but this house is built for him. He built it. His money built it for the largest part, and he needs it. So that argument held sway. So I was very blessed that way. But when it comes to affordable housing, my only experience with that is at work, for the Center for Independent Living where I work. And we get so many calls about people needing housing, and it breaks my heart. It's really hard to hear those calls. It just, when somebody says, I need help with housing, the first thing out of their mouths, I'm just like, oh, the hell? There's so few answers. There's just waiting list. And, people say, well, is somebody going to pay for it? And I'm like, no. So those are really hard conversations.
Yeah. We talked with someone from Money Follows the Person here in Connecticut, which is where that program started and is now a national program to help with housing, but it requires you to be on Medicaid. And it also requires you to be in a nursing home. So there are, we'll talk a little bit later, I think, with some of the solutions, some of the resources out there, but they are hard to get, as you mentioned, Mark. Harley, what's your experience been like?
Oh, where do I start? How detailed can I be? Can I talk about personal stuff?
This is going on YouTube.
All right. Well, I have no shame. I learned no shame the moment I had my accident, and I had to have the nurses teach my parents how to catheterize me. So shame went out the window on that day. When it comes to accessible housing, geez, when I had my accident, I was living at home because I just started a divorce. So I was back in my, childhood bedroom, and it's a double wide mobile home out in the country. No accessibility at all. So 2 weeks before I was supposed to be released from the rehab, we scrambled. I mean, my parents were out every day, all day, trying to find a place while I was still in rehab. And 2 days before I was supposed to be released, we got a place. And this is back in 1994. So accessibility was kind of a new thing, but the bathroom was actually 2 rooms. So the sink was 1 room, and then you go through another door to get to the toilet and the bathtub. And my mom lived with me for the first year after my accident. My dad stayed out at the ranch, and my mom moved in with me because we were told I'd never live alone. And so she stayed with me. We did bed bathing, and because I didn't have a chair or anything, it wasn't really accessible. And I don't use a toilet at all, ever. So that wasn't a problem. But we'd use a 2-quart pitcher. So I'd just lean over the side of my chair, and we'd wash my hair with a pitcher, and then I'd bathe in bed. And then when I gained independence, mom moved back in with dad after a year. Same scenario, bathe in bed or bathe at the bathroom sink and wash my hair in the tub with the pitcher. And it's been that way for most of my life. I've had a few boyfriends that when I was younger, I was skinny. And so they just picked me up and put me in a tub, and then I bathed that way. And sometimes we'd put a pillow down so my butt wasn't, getting sore from the being on the bathtub floor and not getting pressure sores. Currently, I don't have a wheelchair accessible bathroom. I haven't been in a bathtub since 2016. And the reason why we only did it a couple times is because the bathroom was really small and all that. It was not an ADA apartment at all. But it was the one thing that we had because when my other half and I first met, we were both homeless. And so we slept on a friend's couch, a futon, for 6 months before we finally got our own place. And the first place that came available, we're like, I don't care if it's accessible or not. We're getting off this couch. So I honestly haven't sat in a bathtub or a shower since 2016. I wash my hair with a garden hose that's attached to the bathtub faucet right now. And I just recline my chair since I'm now in a reclining chair. So we recline me, and we use a shower hose with a garden hose faucet attached to it. I bathe at the kitchen sink. I brush my teeth at the kitchen sink from the waist up. From the waist down, I'm still in bed. I do that. For accessible housing, I've only had 2 accessible houses that are ADA compliant. And that was my very first apartment in 1994. And then in 2007, when my daughter became pregnant, she wanted to stay in school because she was a teenage mom. Boyfriend was wonderful. He stayed with her. They got married, yada, yada. But the house that we moved into, the previous owner ended up in a wheelchair from a motor car accident. So the wheelchair, the bathroom was wheelchair accessible. That was the last time that was the only time I ever had a bench. Wow, that was awesome. The kitchen had pull-out cabinets for the lower cabinets. So they all had like basket-style drawers. It was neat. It was wow. It was amazing. And they even had like a lowered counter in one spot, so I could just pull up and help meal prep and all that. But for the most part, I've never really lived in a wheelchair, an ADA house or a universal design home. I've just taken whatever was given to me and said, you know what, I'll figure it out. So, and yeah, it's just,
You gotta adapt.
yeah, it's just, I'm the type of person where I'll figure it out or I'm just going to suffer and go along with it until I can get something better. But I always adapt. It's just, that's life. I don't want life to cater to me. I want to find my independence and fight through, what is.
That is a
Yeah.
commercial right there. She said, I figured it out. I just adapt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and when I lived in India for 6 months after graduating college, that's kind of what I did too. There wasn't much accessibility whatsoever. We had to, take our parking space in front of our transitional living home and make a ramp and get yelled at by our neighbors for reducing the road space for their SUVs. And um, I've never seen a protest for the construction of a wheelchair ramp before, but that's what happened out in front of our house. That's how kind of like they got to catch up on some ADA stuff over there in Delhi. But you know, that's what I was used to. But then coming back here and being in public housing, like, we can adapt, but there's some of us who can't, and there's, especially, in public housing, I was surrounded, like I was the youngest person there. There were elderly people who needed to be in nursing homes with 24/7 care and who had dementia, et cetera. And those supports weren't there. So, um, some of us can adapt, others can't. We really need that universal design. And maybe that means instead of a ramp into a house, it's elevating the landscaping, to make that a flat entry or whatnot. But yeah, it's crazy that we all need different things, but need to figure out how to accommodate all of us. On to the second question, is living independently in the community important to you, Corey? Why or why not? What has been your experience, or what have you heard from others about alternatives such as nursing homes? And have you seen any alternatives that have worked well for some?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mark touched on something that, you know, I felt the same way. So he said that when he got hurt, his room was already downstairs and not being able to like enjoy dinner sometimes with everybody, or sometimes people would come down and like eat with him. I remember like with my when my aunt was alive, her son's house is a split level home. So I would always, during Thanksgiving, enter into the lower level, but then it's separated by, maybe 6 or 7 steps. And then in order to get in that portion, which is where the living room is, the kitchen area and dining room area is, you have to go up another set of like steep stairs. Not to mention, like you talked about topography of land, had to go up a hill, then go up the ramp. And Thanksgiving, it's cold here in New England, can be icy weather, and it's very dangerous. But I would feel isolated. So the idea of community is so important, because you know you can live independently. Like I have my own house, my own transportation, things like that. But when I commune with like family, I felt isolated, because I couldn't be in multiple places when I wanted, and just moved as freely as I would normally do at home. And so we started changing the way things were ran, and people started coming to my house where I can still enjoy that level of independency, and still feel a part of the community. So it is very important to be able to go out and about freely. So that's been my experience. As far as like alternatives, as far as like the difference between nursing homes and things like that, sometimes I talk to caregivers who work in nursing homes, and they make the same valid points that sometimes I wonder, like, do you ever shake up anything at your job, right? Like they'll say, man, it's horrible in there. It's terrible. It's not a place for somebody to go. You're very fortunate that you live this way, right? And so when I drive past like some of the kind of independent communities, like for people who are elderly who have had that generational wealth here in Bloomfield, I'm like, it's lovely for them, They have parking spaces that are handicap accessible. They can hire a nurse or hire caregivers to come in, and though they depend on people, they still have that luxury um, where they're not by themselves. And that's, I think, predominantly what I think is like, I wish it was like a solution for everybody. Like from the time that you are born to the time that you start becoming an adult and you start working, that you start really taking retirement and becoming older seriously, that you save for those moments because you don't know what it's going to be like. But Harley, well, John, rather, what about you? Like, do you think being independent and being a part of the community is important?
I mean, your example made me think of this question differently. So living independently is one thing. Being in the community, like having retaining access to the community, as another. And that reminded me of, when I was at college. Um, when I was at Wesleyan, I was on the freshman dorm. I was with everyone. It was great. I transferred. Uh, I transferred to Dartmouth, and I had an accessible room in a place with a whole bunch of seniors, and the rest of the transfer students were like on the fourth floor of another building that was not accessible. So I had my accessibility. I had a door opener. I had everything. I had my own bathroom, but I was living alone, completely independent. I could get out and about and move everywhere. But the community that I was supposed to be a part of these like 12 or 15 or 20 transfer students, was not accessible to me. And I never developed friendships with them, never really got to know them because of that living situation. So, and I felt very isolated. Like even though I was transferring schools, I was going to a really good school. I was really lucky and fortunate. I actually ended up getting chronically depressed because of the social isolation I felt, where I was just surrounded by, well, seniors in college. They're all living with their best friends who they've made connections over 4 years, and they're living in their own little enclaves. And here I was in my one room by myself, hearing everyone else have fun in a new place, in a new school, hadn't made any friends yet, full of opportunity, full of isolation. That was really strange. So community is really important. And independence, you cannot you can't choose independence and give up community. I feel like the purpose of independence is to be able to access community. If you can't have both, it's not worth it, you know. Um, so and regarding nursing homes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, but I think that's another example of that at play in a nursing home. You're living with other people. It's communal living. It's almost like a dormitory with 20, with caregiving around the clock, right? What's not to like about it? Um, well, it's the risk of not being cared for and getting pressure sores and understaffing and not being able to interact or get your needs met to be able to go out and about. And so I think those go hand in hand. Independence is in order to access community, and community living needs to foster independence. It can't take it away. And nursing homes oftentimes do exactly that. They remove that independence possibility. Charlie, would love to hear your thoughts on this. Is living independently in the community important to you?
Well, like you said, John, it's, independence and then community. To me, they're kind of two different things, but kind of commingling. And independence, number one, that is the most important after my accident, especially since I was told, I'd never live independently. And for being 19 years old, I was like, watch me. I could not imagine having to live with someone for the rest of my life. I was like, no way. So I fought hard to get my independence. And I've actually, I've lived alone for a little while when I was in California, when I was still in my hometown. But for the most part, since my accident, I've lived with someone because the prices of rent is just too much. When you're only making like 700 something a month or 600 something a month way back when, it was expensive. And now, I mean, I only make $983 a month, and they expect you to have 3 times the monthly rent, for an income. Good luck on finding a room for rent for 700. It's ridiculous. Being a part of community, I think that's awesome. To me, being able to live independently in a community is great. Being part of the community, being able to interact with people, that is kind of the vitality of human existence. So it's really hard to be independent and part of a community a lot, because you do run into barriers and stuff like inaccessible shops, inaccessible restaurants. And yeah, there's a lot that are accessible, but in some places they're not. So being independent is one thing. Being able to be independent and part of the community is something different. And I wish more places were more accessible across America.
Yeah, you spoke to something that is, I think, at the heart of the dilemma of the housing crisis for people and persons with disabilities. The co-founder of PayPal said this in an article that I read earlier this month. He said that the rent goes up in a neighborhood, but the income of, like, it could go up 50%, but your income is not going to go up 50%, right? So like you're going to naturally be forced out of it to move in perhaps somebody younger than you who spent time going to college, getting degrees, and is just a higher income earner. And that puts you as a person with a disability who depends on the government, just at their beck and call, because you're kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do? And it's just like, well, I don't know. You need to figure it out, or maybe you should have did better when you're younger. It's like we're stuck at a crossroads. We definitely are. Mark.
So, yeah, working for where I do, the Center for Independent Living it's all about living independently. That's what you want to do. And if it's at all feasible, and that's central to our role, is trying to help people with that, figure that situation out. So pretty much everybody I work with lives independently. Nearly everybody has a disability of some kind. But, there are some, there's different levels of independence. There's, some of us, myself included, have a PCA that comes a couple of days a week or whatever you need. But again, if my house wasn't so accessible, I wouldn't have near the level of independence that I have. And I know how blessed I am, and I never forget that. And so thankful for that. Every day, that's including my prayers. Thank you for my house, my yard, my scooter, my van, and my mower. Even though my mower's an ancient piece of shit that barely runs. But it's important to my independence too. I can mow my own grass. But nursing homes, my experience with nursing home was when I was in college. I had a great aunt that she lived with my grandparents, or my great-grandparents, when I was growing up, when I was a kid. And then when they passed away, she had to move into a nursing home. She used a wheelchair. She had a stroke a long time before I was even around. So she had a disability from that. And so she was always in a wheelchair. She could walk a little bit when I was a kid, but then she got older and heavier and couldn't do any more of that with her braces. So she was always in a nursing home. So I would go to visit her often when I'd come home from school. And it was the highlight for her. And I enjoyed it too. But she'd always want to go around and show me to other people, introduce me to other people in the nursing home. And this is my nephew, blah, blah, blah. He's doing this, he's doing that. And I thought, well, what's the big deal? But it was a big deal to her. But, the smells, the noise, the sporadic help, all of that associated with a nursing home was, I made up my mind then, no matter what, I never want to live in a nursing home. And, at work now, I still get calls from people. I'm in a nursing home. I want to get out. And we'll do our best to help. But, there's, as we've already touched on, there are limited resources and limited mechanisms for that. But yeah. Oh, and one of my buddies, one of my best friends, Para, had shoulder surgery last spring, and he had to go into a nursing home, assisted living, for, I don't know, 2 months of recovery. And I went over to visit him, and I thought, "Ooh, nursing home haven't changed in 40 years. This is what I remember." Yikes! And yeah.
Well, it's too bad. It's too bad there isn't more alternatives. I mean, I know my grandparents, they were fortunate enough to be in like an assisted living house, like where they were living with other elderly folk. And that was where, at least on my mom's side, and that's where they were until they passed. You know, it was like a dormitory for old people. And it's too bad that, you know, there isn't that kind of format. I guess it's kind of like renting an apartment building, but even that isn't really communal in nature, unless you're sharing the laundry machine, and that's the worst part of communal living in an apartment building. I can attest to that. You never know what you're going to find in that laundry room in public housing, but yeah, I wish there were some better alternatives that didn't have the medical feel of the nursing home. But moving on, since we're coming close to the end, you know, Harley, do you have any concerns about rising costs related to housing rents, rent loans, modifications, furnishings that can affect due to recent events and developments such as the imposition of tariffs? What are you doing to adjust to these changes, and are you concerned about how it will affect your autonomy?
No, I'm concerned about it all the time because right now we live in a house with 3 incomes and we still have to go to the food bank every other week. It's ridiculous. Prices are going up and the incomes aren't going up to help balance that at all. And it's not just for people with disabilities, it's for able-bodied people also. I'm seeing a lot of people struggle. There's actually a movement that's starting, and that is kids that are like 19 to 23 living in their vehicles because it's the only thing they can afford. I mean, you got more youngsters living in Walmart parking lots and truck stops than you do in actual apartments. And those are able-bodied people, for goodness sakes. What's going to happen to us who are stuck on a fixed income, who rely on government aid, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security? It's daunting to think about on a frequent basis, but the reality is it's getting bad. Up in the state of Washington, they actually had a roommate program for people with disabilities because they understood the expense of housing. And so you'd go through, a long process about the type of music you like. Are you 420 friendly? Do you like drinking? Are you quiet?
Most important things.
Yeah, it was like a 2-hour interview, and they took all this into consideration to try to pair you with someone as identical to you as possible. So, I was grateful for that. I never got to the point where I used it. I ended up living with my kids and then meeting someone, but still, it's scary to know that you can't live alone anymore with a disability hardly at all. And I don't know recently. Sorry about that, children. I don't know about recently, but I know that with room, just a bedroom is at least $800 or more, and if you're lucky, maybe $700. But then you're in a bedroom in somebody's house. That's not your home. And I know I wanted to own a home, but from the recent laws that I've read with the Social Security Administration, I'm not allowed to have more than a $2,000 asset. So if I wanted to buy a car, it had to be less than $2,000. If I get
the owning one home and one car don't count as part of that $2,000 asset. That's an important thing to clarify. They do not count.
Well, thank you, because I wanted to buy a home and I was told I can't. The only way I can buy a home is if I inherit it. So I know that, once I turn 55, with all the outstanding bills from Medicaid and Medicare, they put a lien on anything that you own. So they pay back the bills, and then your family gets what's left. So I just make sure that I don't inherit anything. I have everything going straight to my kids and my grandkids. Can't take what I don't have.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, but it bothers. It kind of hurts really bad because I've always wanted that American dream of having my own house, a place to call home, something that is mine and tangible, and never will.
And Corey, how about you? Do you have concerns about the rising costs? And what are you doing to adjust to these changes?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a very conservative person, as it is financially. So, I'm always like trying to have the backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan because you just don't know, what's going to occur in life. And, I try to be safe than sorry. But I wanted to make 2 points about why like this is such a concern in general. We were talking about communities and retirement living. So, one of the retirement communities here in Bloomfield, I just did a quick Google search. It can cost a monthly rate of $1,966 to $13,475. This is one of the most like upscale, exclusive kind of retirement homes here in Bloomfield. And I can remember going there as a fourth grader. And unlike our previous conversation about nursing homes and the smell and the thing that you want to avoid, this is not that. But at the same token, people can't afford to live in that luxury in old age. And then the other thing that concerns me, it really relates to what Harley said. Like, so today I received, it was yesterday, a report from the Social Security office just about my benefits and, my past work experience and stuff like that. And though like everything is fine, it almost feels threatening that they say right here, promptly report events which may affect your benefits. You return to work since your last report. You should want me to, right? It feels scary. Like if I do work, you're just going to automatically take something that that I need in the first place. It's just, or your doctor says your condition has improved, even if you do not have a job now. It's like all these stipulations that we have to live under. So in addition to the tariffs, even the social safety nets that we do have to protect us, is going back to that feeling of, you got to make sure you're earning it. And in a way, I have to make sure I stay disabled in order to be able to keep these benefits flowing in. So those are my biggest, takeaways from it.
Also, if I were married, then you have to report your partner's income, and then they take away my disability to equal out what they make, because as far as they're concerned, they are supporting me, and I'm now their dependent. I'd lose my Social Security. I think it's Social Security disability. It's the one that you get from the state. And then the one that I get from my work history is all that I'd keep. So I would lose $500 something a month in my cash aid, and I'd only have like 300 something. I'd have no food stamps, no medical, Medicare or Medicaid, gone. And it's like, I thought you want us to be independent, but yet you take away everything to prevent us from being independent. And then I look at it as, if we want to get married, you're punishing us for getting married by taking away our only source of income. But yet if an able-bodied person marries an able-bodied person, that person's not forced to give up their income. Why am I being treated different?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good question. And Mark, I want to give you a chance to share. What are your concerns about rising costs related to housing, et cetera, due to recent events? And how are you adjusting to those changes?
Well, I'm extremely blessed that when I built this house and made it fully accessible, but I was married then, and two incomes. But initially I wasn't working. I was an intern and then working part time, and but right after I got married, I became full time. So I was working for the state and had all the benefits, state benefits, and things of that nature. And she had a decent job. But my job was always a little bit better than hers for the most part. So that worked out great for quite a few years. and almost had the house paid off. And then I made some really stupid decisions and wound up being divorced. And that was, that was really, really difficult, of course. And when and and now I've got a whole nother loan, and some months are okay, some months are really, really, really tight, and for some reason I'm noticing that the last 6 months have gotten even tighter. Maybe that's expenses are going up and all that, but I hear horror stories at my job. Those are always the hardest questions when people call with housing questions. And I tell them there's plenty of places if you got $2,000 a month, but finding something that's $800 to $1,000 a month subsidized affordable housing is extremely difficult to find. There's waiting lists everywhere, so that's the nightmare of that.
Yeah, I just want to point out before we close, the average nursing home monthly cost, what Medicaid pays per person for a month. Let's say you're in a hospital, you want to go home, you want to be independent in your home. It's not accessible. You can't find accessible housing. There's a waiting list. There's not enough public housing, what have you. And the state is paying on average $77,200 or $7,600 a month per person on average at a nursing home. So that's the cost per month per person on average for us not having suitable housing, not having affordable housing where you could be. I mean, that's like top of the line luxury, like penthouse apartment rent right there, right? $7,600 a month. When we're just looking for, give me a $700 a month room, and we'll be happy with a wide doorway for a bathroom. So something's got to give, because that's our state governments that are paying that. That's what our tax dollars are going to pay for. So something can be done, something should be done, but it's gonna take a lot of us kind of making some noise about it to get that to happen wherever we're living.
That was jaw dropping. I think as we're searching for actionable solutions and what have you, we have to, I think, come to a place where we're just like, how do I meet people's basic needs, or just their needs in general, without it feeling like it's such a burden to do that? If a doctor can diagnose you with any condition and tell you you're going to be permanently in this position, well, if you can permanently tell me that, then give me permanent care solutions so that I can live and thrive in whatever community I move to. It shouldn't matter if I move from one state to another state. It shouldn't change if my condition does not change, right? I'm paralyzed for 20 years. When I left the hospital, they put me on a medical plane, flew me to Massachusetts, and I got into a wheelchair, and I've been in a wheelchair since then. It hasn't changed. So don't change on me. Just progress with my life, right? So it's like, hey, let's say, I don't currently have a ramp because, I did much what Jonathan suggests as an alternative. Everything is built up to the level where I can just transition from my house to the concrete. But that's what's needed. If a person did have a ramp and it's broken down, you just pay for that to be repaired. The person shouldn't have to jump through, lion tamers and hoops and what have you, just to make their home just that much more comfortable and accessible. And I think that we need to be really in touch with the communities that are affected the most and are at risk, because it's our lives that are on the line. And for those who haven't reached this point, listening to our stories is an opportunity for you to plan ahead, and you definitely should, take, heed and to our warnings and what have you, because, as Harley expressed, I was living on a couch. And that's an invitation to a bed sore, right?
Hmm.
Mark had to deal with like, okay, somebody's got to pick me up and put me in a bathtub. Bathtub is pretty hard. All it takes is one fall, it's a broken bone, and now you're back to a nursing home, right? These things are difficult, but they're not impossible, as John alluded to. You can pay that much money. You can vouch for some of the simple needs that we're requesting in the disability community. But guys, thank you so much, as usual, for participating in our More Than Walking video podcast discussion.
Keep in mind that if you're out there and you need support for housing and you have a disability, reach out to your local Center for Independent Living. Reach out to someone like Mark. It's hard, but there are solutions. And you can also reach out to spinalpedia.com, request peer mentoring support, and we will put you in contact with community resources that can help. And of course, stay tuned in and sign up for the More Than Walking newsletter at morethanwalking.com to learn about the topic we will cover next and how you can participate. Also, like, comment, and subscribe to our More Than Walking YouTube channel to watch each podcast, and click that notification bell so you are alerted when new episodes drop. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for More Than Walking or Super Adaptables.
And as always, until then, remain encouraged, stay hopeful, and above all else,
Keep adapting.